What could be more terrifying than losing someone you love? Only the desperate attempt to bring them back at any cost. Welcome to Depthline. Today we'll break down the 2025 Australian horror film from the creators of the breakout hit, Talk to Me. Bring Her Back by brothers Danny and Michael Philippou. This is a brutal story about grief that turns a loving mother into a true monster, willing to sacrifice innocent children to resurrect her daughter. Prepare for a bleak journey into the darkest corners of human despair. The story begins with ominous, grainy footage of an occult ritual. A girl stands in the center of a chalk circle. A large man steps into the circle beside her. Something horrible happens. The girl is hanged in front of the camera. And then a second girl suddenly comes back to life with a distinctive wine-colored birthmark under her eye. This chilling scene sets the tone for the entire film and hints at the terrible events that will unfold later. Next, we meet 17-year-old Andy and his younger half-sister Piper, who is almost completely blind and can only tell light from shadow. Despite his youth, Andy feels an enormous responsibility for her and tries to protect her from a cruel world. Their relationship is built on unconditional love and trust. To Piper, Andy is not just a brother, but a true guardian and protector. One morning, the siblings find their father's body lying lifeless in the shower. The sudden death turns their lives upside down. Now they are orphans, completely alone in the world. Andy desperately begs social worker Wendy to let him stay with Piper and become her official guardian. But he is only 17, 3 months short of adulthood. Under the law, he still cannot be the legal guardian of a minor girl. The children are placed with foster parent Laura, an eccentric former counselor who lives in a secluded house in the woods, away from prying eyes. Laura seems friendly and understanding, ready to take both children under her care and give them a new home. She introduces them to another foster child, a boy named Oliver, who has completely stopped speaking since Laura's own daughter Katie died. From the very beginning, something about this house feels wrong. Laura shows a strange preference for Piper, constantly surrounding her with care and attention as if trying to replace someone, while she treats Andy noticeably colder and even with some hostility. Oliver's behavior is also deeply worrying. The boy is silent, stares with a vacant look, and behaves as if he is under some influence or control. Andy begins to notice more and more disturbing details. Laura keeps a shed locked in the backyard and forbids anyone to enter. Her behavior becomes increasingly unpredictable and even frightening. And at night, strange things happen in the house. Rustles, creaks, unexplained noises. One night, Andy wakes up in a wet bed, which humiliates and embarrasses him deeply. He tries to secretly wash the sheets so no one will find out about the incident. But the truth is far more sinister. It isn't his fault, and his body didn't betray him. Laura is deliberately wetting his bed while he sleeps in order to create the impression that he is mentally unstable, suffering from enuresis, and unable to care for himself, let alone Piper. This is only part of her cunning, malicious plan to discredit the teenager in the eyes of social services, so he will be deemed unfit to be his sister's guardian. Meanwhile, Oliver grows wilder, more uncontrollable and openly dangerous. He begins smashing the house in fits of rage, biting Laura until she bleeds, eating inedible objects including soap and paper, and even parts of his own body. He gnaws his fingers until they bleed. His condition rapidly deteriorates each day, as if something terrible, hungry and inhuman is growing inside him. Andy realizes he must act immediately before something irreversible happens, and he goes to the foster agency to report everything that's going on in Laura's house. There, on a wall crowded with notices, he notices a missing child poster for a boy named Connor Bird, and with horror recognizes Oliver in the photograph. This boy is not Laura's foster son. He's a kidnapped child who disappeared months ago. Andy frantically persuades Wendy to come right away and check what is really happening at Laura's house, because the children are in mortal danger. He leaves Piper an emotional voicemail, apologizing for hiding the truth about their father's abuse, explaining why he stayed silent so long, and warning his sister of the danger, begging her to be careful. But Laura intercepts the message and deletes it before Piper can listen. When Wendy does arrive for an unannounced inspection, Laura tries to look as normal and adequate as possible, quickly tidying the house, hiding all the evidence, and acting like a caring, loving foster mother. However, the experienced Wendy notices a fresh bite on Laura's arm and starts asking awkward, probing questions about its origin. Cornered and realizing she's been exposed, Laura suddenly breaks down psychologically and tearfully confesses her real plan. She wants to resurrect her dead daughter Katie using an ancient demonic ritual she found in occult books. Wendy and Andy, in absolute horror, discover in the locked shed a nightmarish scene that will haunt them forever. Connor Oliver is sitting on the floor, eating Katie's decomposing, rotting body, which Laura has kept in an industrial freezer all these months since her daughter died. They panic and try to flee the house of horrors, but Laura, having finally lost the last vestiges of humanity and sanity, gets in her car and deliberately runs them both down on the driveway. Wendy dies instantly from the brutal injuries. Andy, wounded and bleeding, is still alive and tries to crawl away, but Laura methodically grabs him by the hair and drowns his face in a puddle of rainwater, holding his head under until the last signs of life and convulsions leave the boy's body. Gradually, the terrible truth about the resurrection ritual and its mechanics is revealed. The process requires 3 mandatory components: the corpse of the person to be resurrected, a host possessed by a demon, and an innocent victim who must die in the same manner as the one being resurrected. The possessed must eat the corpse of the person to be revived, digest the flesh, and then vomit the remains directly into the mouth of the freshly killed victim. That is how the soul transfers from the dead body into a new, living vessel. Katie drowned in the backyard pool several months ago, so Piper must also drown there to become a suitable vessel for her soul. Laura picks up the unsuspecting Piper from goalball practice, lies about urgent family matters, and brings her home. Connor, having eaten most of Andy's decomposing flesh, suddenly begins speaking in the voice of the dead brother, using his intonations and mannerisms in an attempt to lure the unsuspecting girl into the trap and calm her. But Piper, despite her blindness, senses with her intuition that something is horribly wrong. The voice is familiar, but something in it is terribly off. Terrified, she locks herself in the bathroom and with absolute horror discovers Andy's cold body lying in the tub. Her world immediately collapses. Her brother, the only person who always protected and loved her unconditionally, is dead. Laura furiously kicks down the bathroom door and drags the screaming, struggling, resisting Piper to the backyard pool. A violent storm begins. Rain pours down in sheets. Lightning tears the sky. Connor stands by the pool, swollen and deformed from consuming Katie's remains, ready to complete the vile ritual. Laura, with inhuman strength, plunges Piper's head under the water. The girl desperately fights for her life, scratches, gasps for air, and manages to break the surface only for a second. In this moment of absolute desperation and nearness to death, Piper screams at the top of her lungs, "Mom!" That single word pierces Laura like a lightning strike straight to the heart. She suddenly remembers in vivid detail how her own daughter Katie screamed the exact same thing when she was drowning in this same pool months ago, begging for help. The realization of what she is about to do, kill an innocent blind girl who calls out to her as "Mom," finally breaks through the thick fog of madness and obsession. Wailing and with heart-rending cries, Laura releases Piper, pulls her out of the water, and begs her forgiveness for everything she has done. The girl, utterly terrified, choking and coughing, clambers out of the pool and runs away from this house of nightmares, not looking back. Piper runs out onto the dark road in the torrential rain and is picked up by a passing car. Her goalball coach, who had noticed the suspicious bruise under her eye at the last practice and came to check if everything was okay, whether someone was hurting her. Connor, meanwhile, in the confusion crosses the boundary of the magical chalk circle that Laura had carefully drawn around the house to control the demon, and the ancient demon, Tari, immediately leaves his exhausted body, freeing the boy. Connor, for the first time in months, comes to himself, realizes the horror of what has been happening to him, cries and calls for help. Finally, he is Connor Bird again, not a possessed puppet. Police arrive at the scene and discover a heartbreaking tableau. Laura lies dead in the pool, gently clutching her mutilated, partially eaten daughter, Katie's body, as if she has finally found the longed-for peace in this grim reunion after months of possession. She dies there in the same water where her beloved girl once drowned, completing the tragic circle. Officers find numerous pieces of evidence of the ritual: the open door of the industrial freezer in the shed with the remains, the chalk magical circle on the lawn, occult books and records. In the final touching scene, we see Piper sitting in an ambulance with tear-wet eyes, wrapped in a blanket. A plane passes overhead, and she listens to its distant roar, remembering Andy's last words. When their father died a few weeks earlier, her brother tried to comfort her philosophically, saying that people aren't burned or buried. We just board a flight into the sky. Piper smiles weakly through her tears, imagining Andy's soul flying somewhere far, far away, to a place without pain, suffering, or cruelty. The film ends on this bittersweet note of hope amid absolute despair. Piper survives physically, but has lost absolutely everything: her father, her beloved brother, and even hope for a normal foster family and a happy future. Connor is freed from demonic possession, but the psychological trauma he endured over those months will haunt him in nightmares for the rest of his life. Laura found her peace only in the cold embrace of death, never able to let go of all-consuming grief and accept the loss. Bring Her Back is a merciless, unapologetic look at how unchecked grief transforms unconditional maternal love into deadly obsession, and how the desperation to resurrect a loved one can become monstrous and willing to kill the innocent. Sometimes the scariest monsters in our world are not demons, ancient rituals, or otherworldly entities, but our own inability to accept inevitable loss and let go of those we loved. If you enjoyed this recap, hit like and subscribe to our channel, Depthline, so you don't miss new videos. We regularly break down the freshest premieres and cult films worth knowing. Turn on the notification bell and you'll be the first to know when the next episode is out. Write in the comments which film you'd like